I have Courtney's bio.
Repeat again.
I also have a bio I can read for Courtney.
Okay, you can do the intro. You can do the intros. I'll introduce you, and then you can introduce Courtney. How do you want to do the questions? People put them in the chat.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we can watch the chat. Put them maybe in bold or in caps for the
It,
questions.
the Zoom has that hand raise option, doesn't it?
I don't
Does
know.
everybody familiar
Yeah,
with that?
you can under reactions.
Yeah, the hand raise is kind of nice because then you can kind of like an order and then ask their own question, right? I'm not sure. Where's the other Nicole? There's supposed to be the other Nicole here
I'm
too.
right here.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not at the Nicole. I'm the Be Socially Smashing Nicole.
Right.
So
It's smashing.
She's the AI expert. She's an AI expert like Chase. We just had the interview with Chase. She's in
Hey,
Las Vegas.
when we do these things, we find like a million people that it's like already around us. It's like the AI people are coming out of the woodwork now. So I love it.
So she's going to tape. You're going to tape. I'm going to tape, and you have to ask permission, I guess.
I'm already recording.
Okay,
So
good.
Nicole, yeah, on your three dots.
Uh-huh.
Go down to your three dots, and I think you can request recording over there.
Mine last one we were in, it did a weird update in the middle. My three dots isn't giving me any options.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think we've got it. I'm
You guys both have it though.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay.
all right.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And if you're in the here and now, living in the present moment, you're welcome to. Thank you for taking time to join us tonight. Time is very valuable. This is the Winnipeg group. It used to be called Experiencers Anonymous, but I think now it's called the Winnipeg UFO Research Group or some such name. I'm going to be here for the next couple of months. And I'm brought in Nicole Sackett, who helps me run a lot of interviews and events from Illinois. I always say she's probably related, probably some great great grandchild of President Lincoln, but she's joining us here from Illinois. And our guest tonight is Courtney Marchesani, who's coming to us from Alaska. So I've said watch her, and she's out skiing and she's doing all this wonderful stuff. And in September, I'll actually be on a cruise to Alaska on a contact cruise for a bunch of contactees. Going to be on a cruise. We're going to go up the coast from Seattle. So welcome everybody. Nicole, I'll let you do the intro of Courtney, and then we'll start the interrogation.
Nice. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Grant. Courtney, live from the Alaskan Triangle. But is it all right with you, Courtney, if I read your longer bio? You good with that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
It really lets us know what you're all about here. So I'll put on my best reading voice. Miss Marchesani is one of the psychological researchers who recognizes perpetual advantages of sensitivity. Marchesani's budding research interests began under the supervision of neuropsychologist Dr. Stuart Hall at the University of Montana. She has honed her research methods through fieldwork in creativity, mental health, and integrative medicine. Her first successful grant project was for the University of Washington Medical School I don't know, I'm never going to say it right, department under Dr. Richard Reese. Marchesani received grant funding for the faith-based Plymouth House of Healing. The Supportive House project was funded by the Sound Families Initiative and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Her work, adopted by the Seattle Continuum of Care, is now recognized as a best practice in supported housing models throughout the country. This early research cultivated her lifelong curiosity about the nature of mental and spiritual wellness and shifted her research paradigm to include investigation of spirituality transformative experiences, also known as STEs. Her book, Four Gifts of the Highly Sensitive, which was published by Random House, demystified brain research that explains the unique high sense perception of 20% of the population identified as highly sensitive. Her master's thesis, Mind Body Medicine for Emotional Reactivity and Pain Sensitivity, included the behavioral and cognitive neuroscience of emotions, investigating hypersensitivity in cases diagnosed as medically unexplainable. From this multidimensional research, Marchesani developed an integrative model of psychometry assessments for hypersensitivity. In her PhD dissertation, Courtney proposes a battery of diagnostic testing criteria to formalize hypersensitivity. I'll skip that part. I don't think you really want me to talk about your grant. Well, that's upcoming. You know, we don't want anybody to poach Courtney's work. And then I will add to this, she is the author of 4 Gifts of the Highly Sensitive, which explores the boundary of human perception. She dives down into the gifts of intuition, empathy, vision, and expression. Courtney is known for her intuitive, empathetic style, helping sensitives find balance while living on the extreme edges of sensory perception. You can also now find Courtney on Spaced Out Radio 3 nights a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, hosting their UFO report. So welcome. Courtney. I know that was a long bio, but it was totally worth it.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for reading that. I know it can be painful.
It's all right.
That's why I sent a short one and a long one. You know, I wanted you guys to be able to choose what you wanted.
Well, I will say I threw in your little spaced out radio spots because here lately you are causing such a ruckus and rattling some cages, and you're out there and you're talking to whistleblowers, eating lunch with them, like flying all over the country. So yeah, people need to pay attention. You're in the thick of it.
Yeah, I hope it produces some results, some action. Go ahead, Grant.
No, I just, Nicole's dancing around the point here. Okay, so you're doing the whistleblowers, and this is a UFO group, and people, of course, want to know what's the news.
Well, I did meet with the whistleblower just last month. I went outside of Washington, D.C. I was there actually to visit family, but I set up a meeting to meet one-on-one because it was this comical thing, but actually kind of a bummer that happened. I leaked out this story about the whistleblower story, and I wasn't supposed to. And so I kind of had to backpedal, and I went to meet him and say, hey, I'm sorry. I apologize. And so we met for a few days, and he's going to be the next whistleblower that's actually coming out. George Knapp just talked about it. Jeremy Corbell just released that they just went and met him, and he's going to be the next one to come. He did already testify, and they're thinking he will be in the next hearing. So that's the big news that I'm waiting to come out into the public.
Is he got like firsthand? Because that's what you hear about Gresh. David Gresh is always the complaint is that he's got no firsthand. Is this guy firsthand?
Yes, he is. He's a firsthand witness with NHI, actually, in an interface with a being. It was outside of Nellis Air Force Base, and he was in a convoy. And some parts of his story were already released. They weren't approved to be released, but somebody, I guess it was a security analyst, heard the story and went on a podcast last week and leaked it. So some part of this is already out there. He was in a convoy, and there had been a crash, supposedly, or a sighting a couple of weeks beforehand. And they told their whole group who was going out in this convoy outside of Nellis not to stop for anybody. And he was in the passenger seat. They were driving in the convoy, and they did see somebody out in the desert, and he had U.S. military fatigues on. And so they figured, you know, it's somebody out there who needs help. So they pulled over, and it was a being, not human. And he spoke with it, and then it also spoke with him telepathically. So that's going to be part of his testimony. So yes, he's a firsthand witness.
And this had fatigues on, like military fatigues.
U.S. military, yep, U.S. military fatigue. So they thought it was one of us, but wasn't. So a whole conversation ensues between him, the whistleblower, and the being, and that part of it is quite fascinating. And so I was able to really I feel quite privileged when I was on the East Coast to sit with him and talk about everything, talk about his story. He didn't want his name out. He didn't even want the story out until he's able to, I guess testify, which isn't going to be for a while. So the story is actually out there now, and I'm hoping he will come out and share it all himself. It's supposed to also be in James Fox's movie. Nicole knows that as well. So, we're just waiting for him to give approval to talk about all of it openly, but I have shared a lot of it already.
Well, how much are you allowed to talk about?
I don't really know. I'm kind of skirting on the edge here because I leaked the whole story on Spaced Out Radio initially, and I wasn't supposed to. So I had to kind of walk that back, and we took the audio down from it. Then when I saw this other guy share the story last week, I was like, can we share the story? And he was like, no, he didn't want us to share it on Spaced Out Radio yet. So I'm waiting to get approval from him to share is this going to be online? Is this going to be aired live, after?
Yeah.
So I wish if it was a closed group, I could tell everybody. But since it's going to go online,
I don't want.
Since it's going to go online, I probably can't.
Add to this. I can add to this because it's all in the public realm.
Okay.
James Fox's movie, which if you can go online, he was promoting his movie on Twitter, and now it's all in Reddit spaces that he likes to take selfies while he's editing his projects. Well, he had a screen up and it had the whistleblower's name across it because James has interviewed him for this upcoming film he's putting out. So the name got put out there. Savvy people like myself and Courtney had also heard this name, from whisper groups and things like that. So it's kind of like double confirmed. But then, of course, it all got kind of taken down in lieu because he's still having a lot of his stuff reviewed by Dopser. Like, that's how I understood it. So there is more kind of coming out, and you can find his name, even though kind of some of us have been asked to please not megaphone his name out there right now. So
thankfully, I never said his name, but I did what I was trying to do was doing some fact finding about him. So I asked some friends and sources, and in that discovery process, they just shared the story because one of the individuals, one of my sources, was actually part of the UAP task force and had heard the story before he was going to go on James Fox. So a couple people just shared the story. And so when I went and shared the story, I thought we had approval because it was already out there in the community, but it wasn't. So that's why I had to kind of
I think that's personal discretion, because he was in an open forum discussing these things. He called himself a whistleblower and smiled about it. And then now 6 months later, it's kind of like, oh, wait, let's micromanage this, I guess, is how I kind of took it. So
well, and there's other people micromanaging it too. There's journalists involved in this. David Grush is involved with this. I think Chris Mellon is involved on a couple different levels, one with David Grush and then also with the whistleblower working on the media part of it. So I just kind of hopped over that whole process, leaked the whole thing. But I had a couple sources verify it. So I felt like it was okay to run with it, but it wasn't.
I think the other interesting thing that has kind of come out of this whisper brigade around this right now is that they are seeking some sort of whistleblower financial assistance to maybe help whistleblowers that come forward and end up getting booted from their jobs or get their job situation tied up because they lose their clearances and can't apply for certain other jobs. And there's a situation going on there. And I know people are kind of like, what? We're supposed to give them money now? What's going on? So I think that's going to be a situation as well. But what else do we want to talk about?
Well, I got some questions now because I'm trying. I'm not
do it.
So my initial question is most important, whether you can talk about it, is what was the communication? Did they talk about nuclear weapons? Did they talk about an environment? Was it what was the message from the being?
Here's what happened. They were going in the convoy and he was in the passenger seat. They roll up to the being. They think it's one of us, but it's not. It was a being with a bluish kind of skin, no ears, very smallish kind of ears. And it turned towards him and asked for an element for its ship. And the whistleblower said, why didn't you go over to, over to Area 51 for that? And the being said, because, they're murderers. They're murderers over there. And so that was the story as it was told to me. Now, I haven't gotten and asked him for detailed like facts about all the story. When Dave contacted him initially, when we were kind of in that frightened mode that we'd released too much information, he said, I'm only going to confirm the convoy to Dave. And so then when I went and met him and apologized and said how, sorry I was, we got into these long protracted discussions about the programs, about the old programs. So the being also referenced the old programs over at Area 51 and how they had all this negative stuff going on. Now, he didn't tell me about the whole conversation that he had with the being in that context about the programs and what were involved. The whistleblower spoke with me about his direct involvement with the programs, his career, his military career, how he got in contact with all this, some of his personal story and his personal life. But that was the conversation that was shared with me.
Okay, so you talk about sensitive people. So you have a bunch of people in a convoy. Is he a sensitive? Is he in the program already and then he meets the being, or does that develop after?
Yeah, he's in the program already. And what I didn't know from his and my conversation was interesting when this other leaker came out and leaked the other parts of the story is that there was a crash a couple weeks or a week before they're in the convoy out there. And that was like a really important part of this context because a ship went down. And so they didn't, his superior said to their group in the convoy, don't talk to anybody out in the desert because obviously there would still be possibly extraterrestrials or beings out there that they didn't want them to run into. But he already was in the program when this convoy thing happened. Because I
talked. The only one got a message. He's the only one that got the message.
When the being was talking to him in the middle of the conversation, he said, I'm going to talk to just you now. And he went telepathic instead of using his mouth because he said, the driver's freaking out. He's not, he almost ran into me and the guy in the back seat is not coping well. So I'm just going to communicate with you telepathically. So when he and I had this discussion afterwards, the whistleblower and I asked him about that. And he said one of the things that he's learned from being in the programs is that's one of his unique abilities is when he has telepathic exchanges with an NHI, his own emotions don't get stirred up so much that he is freaking out about it. He's able to communicate with an NHI and actually realize it's his own emotions. That's one of the things that he explained to me. It's kind of one of his abilities that not everybody has. Because when you connect with an NHI, I guess when that telepathy happens, emotions are stirred up, like the emotional resonance goes higher, but he somehow knew discernment between his own emotions and the beings. And he also told me that when you connect with an NHI telepathically, some part of their memory stays with you, which I also thought was really interesting as a piece of information.
Is this a classified? Has he got a classification, and why would he violate his security clearance in order to? Because you're sort of taking responsibility for this thing coming out, but eventually, eventually, I got to go back to the fact that he's the guy that talked.
He did, and he shared it on the UAP task force forum. That's where he first shared it because they were starting to do investigations, and he was coming up as a witness saying, "You guys really need to investigate this. You're not going into, these different parts of the program." And so one of the people that I know saw the story on the UAP task force. So right now, this is only a story. I can only share it as a story because I was basically warned. The CIA got in touch and said, if you have stuff from that UAP task force website, the forum, they said this to me, Courtney, you could get prosecuted because if you have anything on your computer that's classified or anything that's on the high side of the UAP task force forum, you could go to jail.
The CIA said that to you?
To me.
You sure it was CIA?
Yes, it was definitely CIA.
They said, why would the CIA is not allowed to operate inside the United States? Like, why would they be talking to an American?
They said that there was going to be an investigation about all of this, and that for the people that leaked information out of that UAP task force forum on the high side of it that was classified, they were just warning me, saying that you don't want anything apart, you don't want any part of this, you don't want to be near it. So I don't know if it was they just didn't want the story to come out at this time, and it was part of a ploy, right? To kind of say, you just be quiet for right now, and, you know, trying to scare me and say, hey, don't share this part of it because it's going to come out later. But there was definitely a threat involved with
It
it.
didn't work very well.
No, I mean, I was quiet for a while. But then,
And has anything happened? Because I've been in this for 50 years. I've always heard these stories, and I've dealt with Ron Pandolfi and indirectly with Kit Green and the presidents of the United States. I've never been threatened. I've never had anything. So did anything happen to you?
yeah, well,
Negative?
I had some weird stuff happen. Yes. I mean, when he and I were meeting, actually, two groups of people came in while we were meeting and took videos of us, which I thought was just unbelievable. Yeah, while we were at a Starbucks.
Oh,
They just took a video of us sitting there, and then a couple of them came around us while we were meeting and just kind of walked around us looking at us, and he was like, I think I know that one guy. And I was like, oh, great. You know, great. Because he showed me his badges and all of his government stuff to prove to me that he was who he said he was, so that I'm, you know, felt safe. So yeah, some weird stuff has happened.
weird.
Yeah.
Well, I've never, this is the first time I really heard this story. Let's one more question, then I'll go to Nicole and she can ask some questions. But in terms of the government, so you see what the government's just come out with this report and says no ETs, no nothing, it's all a misidentified phenomena. Have you gotten any reaction from the government? How are they responding to this? And you're talking about he's going to testify. Who's going to take his testimony in terms of the government? Because the government thing looks like they're basically shutting this thing down.
I know it does, but he's saying that that's not the case, that the whistleblowers are continuing to work on getting to members in Congress. He's met with multiple members of Congress. He's shared his story. He's already testified to the Inspector General, and his story has already gone through. So they have it, and he will be called to testify. I'm not exactly sure when the hearing's going to happen, but he said he's been asked and that he will testify.
There's a House. Do you know if it's the
Yeah.
House committee? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it would be another House committee. It would be follow-up to the first one.
Okay. Question for Nicole. You're talking to a guy once was CIA, still maybe CIA. Have you talked to him about this?
No,
Oh,
I'm too
okay.
busy trying to talk to him about other stuff. You know what I mean? Like we're not really we're in the past right now. We're not really talking current ufology. So I make notes though of when I can slide these kind of questions in and see what I can get a comment on. So I've
Very
been
interesting.
talking with Courtney a lot too. She's been like my touchstone with this
Yeah,
to
here you guys have been talking.
make sure I'm not going
So,
insane or
so if you got a question for Courtney that would elaborate on, and maybe we can go back to Courtney, whether you're an experiencer and how did you get into the wonderful world of wacko UFOs and this sort of stuff.
before we move on, I think from our group, they want to know if our whistleblower described the being, if you can give it.
Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, he did. He did. He described him, you know, he said he was average height. Of course, he was wearing the military uniform. He was more of like a blue-skinned type of being, no ears, no prominent ears, and that he communicated telepathically. I don't remember him describing or having a description of the eyes. So I'll have to follow up on that for everybody in the group. But
Did he have
they
clothes
did
on?
say the convoy thought they were like approaching another human until
yeah.
So definitely like arms and legs, like feet on the ground, like looking like a
With
human.
military fatigues on. That
Yeah.
is bizarre.
Yeah. Fatigues. Yeah.
Hair?
US military fatigues.
Hair?
No hair. When they came up to him, I don't think he had any hair. I'll have to double check on that from my notes, but I'm pretty sure he was.
They're not supposed to be outside without their hat on if they're military. Was he wearing his hat?
I didn't ask about a hat, but I can ask. I can
Weird.
follow up.
Yeah.
That'll come out. I'm sure, they'll be like, what are the crime scene sketch artists? That's what we'll need.
That's a good story to start. I thought she was just going to give me some news about UFO sightings or stuff. I didn't know this was going to happen. I mean,
We bring the juice, Grant. We can move it along though, I guess. Like Courtney, I want Courtney to talk about writing her essay for Bix and where that has taken her with research and how you two kind of collaborated and swapped info on that a little bit. And yeah, I mean, I keep telling Courtney she's going to place like 1, 2, or 3 next time. So
Well, I guess that would come to the same sort of thing. Like, how do you get into ufology and BIX? You explain what BIX is, and because that's not really UFOs, that's connected to UFOs. Maybe explain all that and why you're in this field.
Yeah, so I was in long before UFO stuff, I was studying psychic phenomenon, mainly because I had had precognitions myself that were life transforming. They were dreams first that had totally materialized in real life. During the dreams, I paid attention and kind of noticed these dreams were more lucid or more aware. And then during my daylight, typically months later, what I would see in the dream would happen and show up in my reality, my waking life. And so I thought that was really odd. And they were kind of life-saving dreams. So that was the thing that got me into the field long, long ago. Then flash forward, my daughter and I had an experience with lights in Oregon in 2015 when I was taking her to college. We drove down from Alaska down to Oregon. And that's when it was like, everything changed. And then I had found you, Grant, and your work after that because I had more life transforming experiences. Downloads came through after the lights. My daughter had some memories that were kicked off through that. So did I. So we kind of worked on it together. And I just kept working on UFO stuff primarily. I mean, I still kept my afterlife research going and my psychic work going in all my studies. And I wrote my book as well about the different types of sensory awareness. But UFOs has really come prominently into my research. I didn't realize that UFO, psychic phenomenon, the afterlife, all of it was connected until I had my own experience with the UFO. And then that opened up a doorway into my own research. And so, like I said, that's how I met you and kind of got brought into your community. I applied for the Bigelow Institute of Consciousness essay contest that they put out. This was in 2019, I believe. And so I was one of the contestants. Over 1,000 people applied, and I was one of the people that, yeah, that's it. I was one of the people that got in. So I was one of 205 people to compete for the afterlife essay to show proof of consciousness surviving after physical bodily death. I didn't win, but I stayed, in touch and watching what was going on with Bigelow. And so I just put in a grant proposal a couple years ago on afterlife communication using psychic mediums with empathy and visual perception. And so that was one of my latest things. And I continue to work on my PhD with afterlife communication, transformative experiences, psychic phenomenon to try to tie it all together.
What was your paper about for Bigelow? And Bigelow is for people who may not know, is a billionaire guy whose son died and his grandson died and his wife died, and he's been very interested in consciousness, but he owns Skinwalker Ranch. He's the original owner of Skinwalker Ranch. So that's the guy you're working for. What was your paper about, and what's your argument if you were to make it for people here today, life after death? What's the main argument you're making?
Yeah, the title of my paper was The Language of Consciousness. And so I talked about psychics and mediums that I had studied through my own study using psychometrics, which is essentially like a series of 20-some questions that you ask individuals. I brought people in that had a high level of high sense perception in visual and empathic abilities, because they were the ones during my study that had the highest level of communication, either through visual of seeing somebody who had passed away and come back and communicated, or through psychic means. So I took basically empathic visionaries and put them into a qualitative study where I interviewed them about their experiences. I did a little bit of genealogy. I talked about their family history, if it ran in the family, and then asked them to talk about experiences that they had had, whether it was through reincarnation or seeing themselves in another lifetime or experiencing afterlife communication with a loved one. And so I put that into a quantitative and qualitative paper, a 60-page paper. And basically my argument for it was these specific type of people communicate with people who have passed over in the afterlife through a symbolic system. The people in the afterlife give the mediums or the psychics symbols, which they personally associate with specific life experience in order to communicate an idea. And that was the essence of my paper, The Language of Consciousness.
Do you espouse the right brain, left brain thing that I talk about, like with the images coming through the female brain and the male brain being the noise that blocks the signal and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, and I even go a little bit further with that and study people. I don't know if you'll remember this or not, Grant, but in the Winnipeg group last time we talked about this is people who have dyslexia.
Oh yeah.
I've noticed like an emerging trend of individuals who have mediumship abilities, psychic awareness that are profound or more heightened. A lot of times have dyslexia.
Tom
Or
DeLonge being one of them.
some other type of perception like synesthesia. They have synesthesia or dyslexia. They'll run together.
Interesting. You're going down the same path that I started
Yeah.
down. This
Yeah.
idea that you see it as a disability, and then when you see them, you realize like, wow, these people can do stuff that is out there.
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
define sensitive. I mean, because I read your proposal coming up, and you using this word sensitive. How do you? Is there a sort of a chart you use, or when you break them off, this one is, this one isn't? How do you determine someone who is a sensitive, or is there like playing piano, various levels?
There's definitely psychometrics that were done like in the 90s by a woman named Elaine Aron, and she did the Likert scale, the original Likert scale, where she had like 24 questions. The Likert scale would give the depth, right, the depth of feeling of sensory perception coming in. So there's definitely like a quantitative test that you can take. So it's people who feel emotions of others. They feel sensory perception or senses coming in through it would be like tactile. It would be feelings, felt, sense that come through. They feel these feelings and they feel more profound to sensitive individuals. And not only that, the second part of it is they're reactive. They feel a response quicker, faster, and then they respond to it.
And how did you find these people?
It's partially through the book. The individuals did a quiz at the beginning of the book. So they would all fill out the quiz. So then I took all that data from the quiz. I did statistics on it, descriptive statistics on all of the individuals that came through to find basically this threshold of individuals who are in like the top 15%, who are what I call hypersensitive. There's 20% of the population is just typically sensitive. They have sensitivities to things. But then the top part are people who I call hypersensitive or hyper aware. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my advocacy, is work to get these individuals more paid attention to in medical settings, because they're typically not identified and they have a whole host of symptoms that typically come with being hypersensitive.
Now, you would know the work of Diane Hennessy Powell, working with the autistic children and stuff, and she runs up against Haley. Haley's get like, instantaneously picking off telepathic numbers. What's your sort of wow story of sensitives that you've met where you just went like, I can't believe how sensitive this person is, how much they're able to pick up? Did you run into any sort of like amazing characters along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have been through that contest. I was referred to people, and people were referred to me who had these extraordinary experiences. And one young woman told me about an experience where she was actually telepathically projected to in her dream state to this location that she wasn't aware about, where Joaquin Phoenix actually passed away. It was like the night before. And so she had this whole elaborate dreamscape where she went into this cafe repeatedly and had conversations and discussions with him about his death. So I think she was one of the most profound who told me her story. And she found out facts and veridical information that she had no idea about his life through these encounters with him.
Wow. One more question, and then I'll let Nicole ask, because there's probably questions coming in from people. Seth, the first channeler of the New Age, talks about and I'm talking about it in a new book, the period place. Do you believe that we come into the world to work together on different things to raise the zeitgeist on whatever on whatever project we're working on, or do you believe it's a random type thing when we come into the world? Do you believe you've been set up for all this kind of stuff? You know, the synchronicities where you have the experience, because you have the experience with your daughters with the sightings, and I always say, well, what was the UFO doing? And everybody says, it wasn't doing anything, it was just there. And it's sort of like, do you think this was accident? Well, no, I think it wanted me to see it. So what do you what's your view on that whole thing about the world being less random than people think it is, that we're sort of playing these roles, and you have a job to do, I've got a job to do, and that sort of thing.
All the world's a stage, and
All the world's a stage. Yeah. All
yeah,
the men and women are
Shakespeare.
but actors.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I think that I didn't used to believe in any of it. I have to just admit and be transparent that I used to be a really staunch atheist. You know, and through my college years and everything, I was just really very material reality. But through some of my own personal subjective experiences, I really had to open my mind and look at this alternative to what I believed. And so I would definitely say that I have transformed my thinking and am much more open-minded. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is to look at reincarnation studies as a way to validate that.
Okay, Nicole, you can go. And if you don't, I've got another question.
Well, one from our group chat here is they want to know, I think I know the answer, but could you speak on what you think of Jeffrey Kripal's work, or if you've met him and talked to them about the Archives of the Impossible, if you've dug through that? I like to expand on people's questions too, so I'm sorry, everybody.
Yeah, well, once again, I feel really privileged that I found out about the Archives of the Impossible, and I went there and I got to meet Jeffrey Kripal. It was really the most phenomenal thing in and of itself, going there and being in the community. People, I met I met Mike McClellan. Is it McClellan? I'm not sure how to say his last name, but I had seen him on Grant's show, and he was one of the first people I met there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know who you are. You were on Grant's show. And so I bring up these really random factoids because I had heard him say that individuals who have these experiences, some of them have the name Chris. And it seems to be an occurrence with people whose name is Chris, which I thought was really random. But my middle name is Christine. And so I was like, hey, I'm a Chris. My middle name is Christine. And he was like, oh, wow. And so he and I had this like fun little talk about him being on Grant's show and me picking up on that. But then he introduced me to Jeffrey Kripal because we're just around the campus there at Rice University. He introduced me to a couple other people, and I was like, this is fascinating. So I did meet Jeffrey Kripal. I didn't get to talk with him about his work, but I know about his work. One, because when I first met Grant, here's another synchronicity. He was like, hey, you know, people are reading The Flip right now. You might want to read this book, The Flip. And so Jeffrey Kripal had written that book. Of course, I downloaded it and, you know, I started wading into it. And I think one of his cornerstones of his work that I really love is the cosmic mind. And I'm delving into that more and refamiliarizing myself with his work about the cosmic mind, because he's talking about it from a non-materialistic standpoint, a non-ordinary standpoint. And I really love that specific piece of his work.
Nice. I got another one from the chat.
Okay.
What do you know about Asperger's people? And if this person's saying, I have ongoing experiences and was diagnosed back in 2012. Remember
Yes.
their past lives? Have you worked with people with Asperger's?
Yes. When I worked at Harborview Medical Center in the outpatient division, I had several patients that had what at the time was called Asperger's. Now it's changed. So many things are changing in that world. You know, labels and things are changing, which I'm really glad for it. But yes, I have worked with people who have Asperger's, not so much in this new work that I'm diving in with consciousness, but definitely in a clinical setting. Yes, I have.
I was going to ask if, I know you said people have kind of been coming out of the woodwork, and just with your statistical information that you've kind of been able to gather, have you been approached with people that are, there's a lot of databases being formed right now, you know, and gathering of information. And part of that, you know, collection are these like reporting sheets And they're very much, like nuts and bolts, like what did you see, when, where, whatever. There's very few out there that are more towards the higher strangeness reporting end, like you would see with the CCRI surveys or like the free survey. Has anybody like approached you to collaborate and maybe help develop some of these questionnaires for experiencers?
I was on UAP Medical Coalition for about a year. I volunteered at their organization, and they were developing a survey right when I first came in. And I didn't get to I guess I did give some input on the survey data, but not too much. They already kind of had that in process. And so I saw that they just came out with their new survey. But I do think that that's one of the areas where I'm trying to make some inroads with different psychometrics. I did the Parapsychological Association conference last spring and did a whole presentation about these different types of psychometrics to start looking at for paranormal experiences, exceptional experiences, transliminal. And so I brought out all my PhD work and kind of put it in one presentation for that group and that audience to say, hey, there's all this information we can be gathering. I didn't hear much back from that. I did make some good connections through it, like Dr. Daniel Stubbings. He was also there as a presenter during that conference. And so I made a connection with him. So no, I have not been approached, not too much, I wouldn't say.
Maybe I can change that.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my PhD, is to bring some of the psychometrics in. So clinicians, doctors, social workers, therapists can actually sit down with an experiencer and have a sheet to ask those kind of questions to see where it falls and the depth of those experiences.
Yeah, that's something from like my EMT work and that angle. Like I have been speaking with other people like in emergency management services, police officers, first responders, for these types of situations. So we make sure our people get the right sort of help and not just, oh, they're crazy or drunk or loon or whatever it is.
I think other people are trying to make change. Dr. Keith Taylor, I was put in touch with him. I met him at the hearing in Washington, D.C. He's working on it. He just wrote a white paper on first responders and safety. So he's working on that and education for police and law enforcement. I think my role in that would just be more, Humphrey, would be more for psychology-minded settings.
Absolutely.
To educate people.
Les Velez, I'm sure. Right.
Yeah, well, he was in our board meetings. Hold on a second. Let me deal with my dog.
Professor Paul is asking, has a hand up, so you can maybe go there next.
Okay, and Grant, I think we have a question that maybe you could answer maybe a little bit better than Courtney, or maybe both of you could.
Courtney, maybe I'll add on, but
want to know like your opinion on what is the connection between the spirit world and the
yeah, I've got that question for Courtney, because I've written a whole chapter in a new book on that, but I'd like to hear her version of
the connection between the spirit world and the afterlife and extraterrestrials or UFOs, and why did Bigelow change his focus from one to the other?
Well,
Grant, okay. you can take that if you want. Go ahead, and then
I'll give you a little bit on my opinion. Bigelow actually was there first. That's what people don't realize. He gave $3.7 million to the University of Las Vegas, Nevada, before he bought Skinwalker Ranch. He was in this consciousness a long time ago. He had this incident with his son dying and stuff like that, and his father died in a plane crash, and so he's always been into consciousness. The connection with UFOs and near-death experience. One of the things that I quote in my book, I quote Anne Strieber, who people don't know that Whitley Strieber, when he wrote the book Communion in 1987, I think they got 200,000 letters, and they're at that university, at Rice University, that collection of letters that they got. And that's when you had to write a letter, not an email. It was all letters. And she hired a secretary, and they sat there for months and months and months and read every single letter. And she came out to Whitley and she said, Whitley, whatever we're dealing with has something to do with death. And that's sort of the bottom line there. And you'll see this, people will describe, a guy wrote the book called Children of the Greys, talked about when he was on the ship, they brought his dead dog out and he was playing with his dead dog. And then he suddenly got very angry and he said, they're manipulating me. Why would they do this with my dog? Why would they do this? And to me, the more important thing is, like, how did they bring the dog back? Or a woman that was on a show with me one time where she was furious as well. It was like, you'd think that they would be happy about this. She was furious. They brought her husband onto the ship. And he said, she's not dead. He's dead. You know, he's not here. No way. She said, he's got a birthmark on his back. Lift his shirt. And lifted her shirt, and there was the birthmark. She was just floored, but she was angry. And so there is a definite connection between the spirit world and the UFO thing. And I think that's what most people are missing. They're into the nuts and bolts. They're into how does the technology work, and you know, all this kind of stuff. How can we, you know, build the ships and stuff like that? And they sort of miss the point that there is these very clear connections. And the most bizarre story I've heard, and I'll only tell you part of them, and that's Ron Johnson, who's experienced out of Utah, tells the story that LB, his being, and everybody has it's like a spirit guide. Everybody has one being that they talk to. And I was saying, and I'll even bypass. I want to just say, so what being, what's the name of the being you're dealing with? And they just tell you what the name, it's not like they're talking to all these aliens. There's one alien that talks to them. And LB was his being, and he took him into the spirit world 3 times. And the first time was sort of a lower level spirit world. He couldn't see anything. The second one, he could hear his mother talking. He could talk to his mother, but he couldn't see her. And then the third one, he's taken into the spirit world, and he's in this like a heavenly place. It's like a field, and you get this projection that we project what we believe. So he sees this little building, and it looks like a Mormon temple. He's a Mormon guy. A Mormon temple, small Mormon temple, and his mother says, "Ron, when you die, you're going to get a room in this building, and your father's in the building." And she takes him into this building, and that's when he says, I couldn't believe it. He said it was like it was 10 or 100 times the size inside the building as it was outside. And I said, hey, that's what Chris Bledsoe said. That's what everybody said about UFOs. The UFO is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So is he in a spirit world in a Mormon temple, or is he in the UFO? And you see these crossovers. And but it was his being took him to the spirit world, and he said it was definite. He said it was more real than the real world. He was talking to his mother. She was taking him on this tour, and she showed him the crystals, which you'll see in Michael Newton research if you've studied that, and Richard Doty on UFO Cover Up Live, where he holds up the crystal and this crystal image where they do the drawing. And he said the most amazing thing I saw from the aliens was they had this crystal, and you could look at it in a 3-dimensional view, and you could see the history of the world. And they showed, according to Linda Howe, they showed the crucifixion of Jesus to the U.S. government in this crystal. And so you get these crossovers, and you start seeing this story is in all over the place, the crystal story, and the beings and being taken to the spirit world. And I think that's the main thing that people have to learn, is that there's this psychic component. And even Lakatsky, who is the guy who's just come forward that ran the OSAP program, who said clearly, he said, I just want to let you know, the technology is a connection, is a combination of physical and psychic material. Now, he's saying that at this level, but when you suddenly get the government to make an official statement that there is a psychic component to this thing, it's going to be like 2017, where suddenly the New York Times comes out and says UFOs are real, and everybody goes, they are? And everybody, the whole thing just flips, the whole zeitgeist flips. And that's what's going to happen, is people are going to realize there is a psychic component to this thing, and that changes everything, because then it's not a material world, a random meaningless world. Then it's suddenly this thing where there is this spiritual non-local aspect to the universe, and if the government admits that, I think everything changes.
I have to say that one of the things that attracted me originally to your work, Grant, is that you talked about the psychics, driving the craft. And of course, it was like such an unknown to me. And when it hit me, I was like, oh my gosh, this could be why it's all connected. The telepathy, these anomalous experiences, why they're also connected with people seeing the UFOs. So I think Grant probably answered that pretty thoroughly. I don't need to say any more. I see there's folks that have their hands up, so I don't want to take, more time.
Right. Let's go to Professor J. Paul.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate the depth of this conversation and your experience. What is striking me is that there probably is a spectrum from physical to psychic. I think Jung and Pauli were onto it in terms of the psychoid, which is the realm of the archetypes, so to speak. But what I'm curious about, just stopping a bit and looking at what happened in Washington in terms of the DOD's response or the Pentagon's response, the criticism that I'm hearing is that they don't know what the hell's going on. And they are fearful in that it's weirder than UFOs. So I think what behooves us is to perhaps come up with the language and a culture that can look at the spectrum of reality, this ontology, the sense of existence, from what may be nuts and bolts into what is psychic, psi, and spiritual, or totally quantum in the implicate order. But how do we do that in terms of language? Something that I'm struggling with is the spectrum of UFO, UAP, orbs, balls of light, but then getting into the realm of NHI, non-human intelligence. I think we need another term than non-human intelligence, or something other than that. It doesn't necessarily, because part of that intelligence may be us on a telepathic level. We may actually, we've met the enemy and they are us, so to speak, or we have met our friends and they are us from the future, because they're coming out of a realm of space-time dilation and intensity. And anyway, so the question is, what might be some other language than non-human intelligence? And how might we look at that? And also, just one last thing, as Steve Jobs would say, I've actually spent quite a bit of time at Rice. I mean, living here in Texas and gone through a lot of those letters. And absolutely, we are dealing with something that is of a spiritual realm. So, but I'd be happy to hear a conversation on what the quality of the ontology of the existence of this otherness. It is an encounter, and it is connected in a deep realm of perhaps the psychoid. So thank you much for your experience in sharing this. And I think that we're in for a good ride. And thank you, Grant, for all you've done. I connect with you through the crop circle phenomena. That is a whole other thing we need to talk about. There's a message that is coming out slow but sure on all of that sacred geometry. But blessings.
Thanks for bringing up Jung and Freud, those guys. I've relied on them a lot, and I just received in the mail Jung's book on UFOs. So I'm going to start wading into that. But I do believe that, and this is just my own opinion now, so this is not a departure from what you're saying. It's just my own work and what I've been looking at, is the symbolic as a way of doing like intelligence testing with certain types of experiencers. It's one of the things that I think, I picked up in the paper of the 6 layers that Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis co-authored. And everybody gets sick of me referencing the paper, but they talked about this certain type of cognition that's happening where they use symbols to be able to communicate with experiencers. And so we know with archetypes and other types of transformative experiences that often feels, the depth of it feels spiritual. It feels very spiritual, especially when the depth of it is so profound and leads to new things. But it can also be, especially culturally, in certain cultures where this is very accepted already. Grant's done this kind of work. Individuals will receive information through dreams from ancestors, or they'll get apports, things that show up in their bedroom and give them clues about direction forward in life. And so I don't think I think that's part of the problem, is we don't have a good taxonomy, for lack of a better word, that ties it all together. They do seem to be unique types of experiences. So I'm still hoping that we can find something that's more unified. I don't think non-human intelligence does it, but I do think that non-human part of it gives it the caveat that we're communicating with something else besides our own soul. So I think that that's why it has been delineated that way, and in order for people to understand that it is other, it's another being. What that being is, we don't know yet.
I can maybe add to that, because Nicole is dealing with this intelligence guy, and he'll deny he said it, but back 30 years ago already, when he first started to engage with the UFO community, he said, we have a phenomenology problem. And that's my understanding, that in intelligence, it's called phenomenology. It's not UFOs, that it's all linked. It's all the same thing. Even if you get Jim Semivan, who's now very sort of prominent as this former high-level CIA guy who had this encounter in his bedroom with his wife with these beings or whatever. And he defines it. He says, there does not appear to be any there. He said, people think we have to put the dots together. He said, I'm not sure there's any dots to put together. He said, I don't think I'll ever see the result to this in my life. So I call it the intelligence. And that's where I think it's a bigger thing. Everybody's sort of into the awe of the whistleblowers and stories like this. And it's almost like 100 years ago where we as rich people would run around and do seances and stuff like that for entertainment. And now it's like we're doing spiritual stuff for entertainment. It's like, oh, let's go for a sky watch. And we're sort of missing the point that it's much more complex than just a light in the sky. Because when you see the light in the sky, it's really just a light in the sky. It's really not telling you anything. It's the experiencers and this deeper meaning of the idea that I think that they in some ways really don't understand, or that they do understand, and they understand that it's this sort of a spiritual non-local world. And who wants to be the guy who's going to announce that? Like, all that stuff you believe, it's all not right, it's all totally nuts, or that they want to weaponize it. So if you can talk in someone's head, that's the famous OSAP slide 9, things going through metal, engaging people in their minds and stuff like that. So if you're the military and you go in there, that's all you're thinking about. It's like what Danny Sheehan's expression, when you're a pickpocket and you meet a saint, all you think about is his pockets. Like you have this mentality. And so that's where I think that you go. I wrote the book called Managing Magic. And I know that supposedly Pandolfi and the boys were very excited about that, because that's why I used the expression. It wasn't managing UFOs, it's managing magic. And I think at the higher levels, they realize this is much more than UFOs. This is like magic. This has all sorts of bizarre things. And you're sort of getting into that aspect of this other world that's coming in and making these connections. But we're only like step one. We're in kindergarten as to what this is going on, because everybody's still infatuated with sort of the show. It's almost like the Jesus thing, where we're watching Jesus do miracles. And to me, I say you got to get past that and wait for Jesus to deliver the message. But first of all, you got to get people's attention, and that's what they're doing. They're getting people's attention. The awe and mystery is what drives science. Until there's awe and mystery, nobody's going to do anything. So they got everybody on the edge of their seat trying to figure out what is this. And eventually, once you get into it, you realize it's not what you thought it was. And it has these other aspects that both Courtney and I are looking at, is this non-local aspect of the fact that you have crossovers, like with Kit Green, who is the guy that if you're in the US government and you have a contact experience, they send you to Kit Green. Kit Green is very openly said on the record that whatever being you see is dependent upon what your belief system is, that two people in the same encounter will see two different beings. And that's what we got to realize. We're part of this thing. It's a participatory universe, or as John Wheeler said, there is no out there. It's happening in your head. It's a participatory universe. And that's the kind of the thing where we got to go later on. But right now, we're still at the level of the awe and the miracles and stuff like that, of watching all this stuff, where I call it the theory of wow. They're just trying to get your attention. I just call it the intelligence. I think it may be all the same thing. It used to be, in 1895, they were hanging off wooden ships with propellers, and then there's elves and fairies, and it just goes on and on and on. I think it may all be the same intelligence, and it's you that determines how they present themselves. Or there's an Israeli experiencer, his name is Yossi Ronan, who said the being told him, when we come into your world, we take on a body. We don't have to take on a body. We can take on whatever body we want. You can do the same thing. You just don't know it.
Well, in terms of wow, I think the work that Jimmy Blanchette is doing that you brought forward, yeah. I've never heard you say wow so many times in one presentation.
Wow.
But that shows you the intricacy of the universe. When you see Jimmy Blanchette, like a lot of that math is over my head, but you realize like he's onto something, like this world. And that's what I say about the UFO phenomena. I'm not really sure about a lot of stuff, but one thing I'm sure about is it's going to be 1,000 times more complex than people think it is. And I think Courtney would agree with me. The more you look at it, the more complex it gets, and the less you start to learn. You're just amazed at how complex the universe is and what's behind it.
I will say, just to kind of wrap up on that, you did start seeing the use of the word phenomenology, and true to the lingo that we're trying to sort out or maybe improve upon, or that keeps adapting, you can find a few definitions for what phenomenology actually is. But when you put it in context of who's saying what and what they're talking about, it does kind of expand away from just the extraterrestrial. And I will say a lot of people are pushing on this new lingo. And I think who I really like out there right now is Dr. Michael Masters has put forth extra tempestrials. And because it accounts for this like time dilation
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something
It's time,
more
yeah.
than, yeah,
It's
just
time
not-
space warp, time space dilation. Yeah, it's outside. Thank you. Great.
But,
We've
but
got
even
a-
now you have the idea of the Nobel Prize for 2022 is for the non-locality of spooky accident distances, Einstein, and now we're even starting to question, is there time and space? And you start looking at that, then I say, well, how big is the universe? Or if you talk to your dead mother, where's your dead mother? Where is she actually? It may all be a singularity in space. There is no out there, as John Wheeler said. And that's why I say, like, to me, it just gets more weird and more complex, and you start to learn that we had this wrong. We thought the world was flat because it appeared to be flat. We thought the sun went around the earth because it appeared it went around the earth. We think everything was solid because it appeared to be solid, and it's wrong. We're using perceptual reality, and the world is just going to be so much weirder when you look at it, especially if there's no time and space. Then I say to people, if that's true and that's a concept of the mind, then how big is the universe? And people just go back, oh, well, there's aliens coming from other planets. And the illusion is so strong that we just fall back in the illusion all the time. And what the phenomena is telling us is almost like what Seth said, and Bashar and all these people, the idea that you manifest everything around you. That is pretty wild. If that's the idea, that we are the creators of the universe, that God did not create the heaven and the earth, that we created the heaven and the earth. It's all made out of consciousness, and we're building it as we go along. That is just so far beyond UFOs. It's not even funny.
all right. Do we want to move it on to
Yeah, you've got a
Alex?
bunch of hands up there.
Yeah, iPhone 3, you can unmute yourself and ask if you'd like. I'm scrolling through the meeting chat to see if anybody's asked a
Yes,
question.
yes. I have several comments and questions. Okay, the first one is at the beginning of your speech, you were talking about somebody that actually met a blue being. Now, most of the blue beings, I am an experiencer and have been since I was 5 years old. And I've dealt with different other races up there and stuff. And I'm very well versed on a lot of the stuff that's going on there, including the wars and everything like that. And they've done a lot of work on the sun, and they've done a lot of work on the earth, trying to stabilize the earth. And we are presently locked in the fifth dimension. That's why you get all these weird weather patterns and the pole shifts and the volcanism. And there's other like weather patterns that are weird. And also, I wanted to tell you, they're called the Urquequians, and they used to run Area 51 in like the 70s and 80s. And then they pulled out because the government went and violated their contract with them, and they had underground colonies in the middle of the United States where they have the domes and stuff, the colonies, and they started enslaving the colonies and abusing the colonies. Pulled out years later in 1994, and it took me up, and it was like 45 minutes. It was in September 1994. Well, that year also they had the UFO sighting in Ayers Elementary School in Zimbabwe, South Africa. When I did to help, those two things were mentioned in my background check, which was pretty odd. I know I can tell you stories about how I was a nuclear contractor at a nuclear plant, and one of the engineers, so what's the name of the blue beings that run Area 51? And when I said that, I was escorted off site 2 hours later. And another thing I wanted to say about the orbs are multi-dimensional projection devices. That's what they're sometimes used for. That's why you'll see an orb appear, and then the being will solidify out of that orb. When you reduce something into a solid wave, you can project it through hyperuncoupling. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you was, when you worked with Asperger's people, have you done regression hypnosis to find out about their past lives, or are they more of a conscious recaller where they're not able to be hypnotized?
Okay, Courtney, go ahead.
I have in my grant proposal to the Bigelow Institute of Studies have a specific unique research angle, which is primarily to work with people who have had near-death experiences. So it's not necessarily with individuals who have an Asperger's diagnosis or anybody who's on the spectrum. It's targeted to a very specific group of individuals that have what I call sensory augmentation from that experience, which is something that has been studied for a while through different types of groups who have been interviewing people, done case studies on when they come back from the other reality, when their body or their consciousness separates from their body through that experience of clinical death. They find typically when they come back that they have, heightened sensory awareness. And so they're able to perceive things, but they're also typically able to, especially if there's any kind of psychic awareness that has been opened up through the near-death experience, they're typically usually able to communicate with spirit more easily. And so I wasn't designing the study for the Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies necessarily for individuals who are on the spectrum. It was more inclined to find through psychometric evaluations the individuals who had that augmented sensory awareness, and then to take them through a hypnotic experience and see if they could, through hypnosis, communicate with afterlife personalities, because that was what the BIC's grant proposal was asking in their research. They put out an RFP essentially that said, we're looking to get information from the other side, from the senior sources, is how they put it. And so in my grant, I basically used 4 different phases of a study to find these individuals and then to take them through a certain type of hypnosis in order to communicate with those senior sources on the other side. I didn't win the grant, so I haven't been able to apply any of that in the study yet, but that was my intention with the grant proposal. Those were the specific populations I was trying to study, and using hypnotic techniques in hypnosis to communicate.
Were you using the quantum therapy hypnosis that Dolores Cannon developed?
No, but I was taking clinical psychology hypnosis at Saybrook University. So it's actually what they use in the psychiatric community.
Okay, have you heard? Okay, people, like when I was in 5th Rice, she was one of the teachers, and she was sent down from NASA to administer the IQ test to everybody else, and I overheard her conversation when I went back into the classroom to get some money to buy more lunch. I overheard her talking to another teacher, and she was talking about the IQ scores, and I was curious to see what my IQ score was. And then she basically said that my cognitive spatial ability and stuff, she mentioned my name, was typical of different types of children that they're looking for from NASA, and that they're connected, or they're hybrids or something. And then the other teacher said, well, what do you do with these children once you find them? Well, unfortunately, she said, we make sure that they never integrate in human society. And they never get any careers or anything like that. We make sure, because they're a threat. Now, what do you say to that? I mean, you don't think Bigelow's involved in that stuff, being a DoD contractor?
I can't really speculate. I know that he got the 22 million. I think that the part of it is suspicious that I find now, thinking about current times, is that, we just got this error report, and yet at, Bigelow and NIDS, they had so many papers and did so much research that hasn't even come out yet, including having their own databases with a bunch of data and information that's never been released. So my question to them would be, if you have information about about this that could support, non-human intelligence or these other beings and they're in existence here, and you have support for that, they should release it, right? Because Arrow is just coming out with a rebuttal saying there's no information and there's no evidence. So I think if Bigelow has it, he should bring it out now at this time. And if he doesn't, I think that's suspicious. Why wouldn't he? To support the efforts.
It's classified.
I can tell you why. It's very simple. Because you have the evil elite, you have the military industrial complex in bed with the negative ET scourge, specifically the negative ET tall whites and Anunnaki. They run everything and have since the very beginning of the human race on this planet. And if they come forward and they admit everything in the disclosure everybody's pushing, what's going to happen? They're going to have to admit their culpability and all the enslavement, usurpation, and using the human race as a commodity and as cattle for the secret space fleet, which is not the human space fleet. It is the negative ET tall white space fleet. And I remember my past lives. We fought them on other planets, and they're doing exactly the same thing here on this planet as they did on other planets with brain implants and everything else. It's really horrific.
Okay.
That's why disclosure won't happen.
It's not the first time that I have heard this. And if those atrocities and horrible human rights abuses are true, then they need to be brought to light, and they do need to come to Congress. And it's not the first time I've heard about the secret space program. Ross Coulthart just came out, I think maybe it's 3 months ago now, because time is going by so fast, but he had come out on an interview where he had talked with someone, one of the whistleblowers, and he was told that you need to look into this secret space program, that it's real, and that, it's something not to be taken lightly. And so I know Ross Coulthart has picked up on that thread. I don't know how far he's gotten so far, but that would be something for you to watch to see if those revelations will hopefully in the future come to light. I hope that they will. If that is something that is preventing a disclosure, it would be a good reason why. You could see why.
Let's go to the next question. I just want to add one last thing to that. And I say about this whole disclosure thing that's going on now. If the Democrats had won 6 more seats in the House, you would be having none of this discussion. Disclosure would have gone through with the subpoena powers with the presidential committee. It was only because they didn't have enough seats and it got blocked in the House. So I think you got to keep that in mind, that that a lot of this is political as well. That so in today's politics, one person can block a major bill and stand there. So let's go to another question, because I see there's hands are going up one after another here.
We're kind of in order. Roll fever. I can't read without my glasses.
Yeah, it's a kind of a weird name.
Yes.
And then Dean. Yeah.
I don't know why the name comes up like that. I can't change it. To Brand's idea that it's in your head, I can give you an example which proves that it's not always just in your head. I had an orthopedic business in Toronto for a while, and some workers, and one day I heard my name called, and everybody else heard it too, except I was the only one that recognized the voice. So it was a female voice, so they sent me out front. It says, oh, the lady in the front in the reception, she called you. I says, no, she didn't. Anyway, they insisted finally, and I don't know why I did what I did. Anyway, I finally walked out. I said, did you call me? No. So I went back, and then everybody was happy. And I was stupid because I recognized the voice. It was my mother calling me. So if I had been by myself, I probably would have assumed it's in my head. But how is it possible? So, of course, I thought there is a special reason. After work, I called her in Europe, in Switzerland, and nothing special. I thought maybe she had a car accident or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Another example since some of you are also interested in crop circles, I was visiting with my sister Stonehenge. And on the way back to the bus, I told my sister, oh, that would be a nice spot there for a crop circle. That was, when was it? July 7, 1996. The famous Julia set crop circle happened during daytime, just a few hours after I pointed out the empty space.
Wow.
So the next day when I flew home back to Vancouver, in a newspaper, at least one newspaper, I should still have it, but I don't know where it is. The headline, crop circle, at Stonehenge.
What did you interpret from that? What did that mean to you?
I have no idea. I had very many, strange experiences in my life. And yes, I've seen many UFOs. Just recently, actually, just a few days. And I was looking for it over the years many times because I saw one and many other people seen it in Switzerland in 1954, UFOs. And finally now I have the evidence. It wasn't just me that saw it. Many people saw it, and of course, I recall the headline in the newspaper afterwards, flying saucer invasion on Lake Constance. So, yeah, I had many strange experiences. And one funny one just happened. I was looking for I was in Germany, I don't know, 15 years ago, something like this. And I saw this star-shaped UFO just circling like a cog on the track or something. And I've taken several pictures, but and didn't know how to. I should have switched the camera to movie, but I didn't want to lose the shots. So anyway, I have about 4 or 5 still shots. Wow. And at Christmas, my grandchildren and my daughter was visiting from California, and one of the boys said, "Oh, I understand you're interested in UFO," and he showed me a picture on his cell phone, which a friend of his gave him actually, and it was exactly the one I photographed in Germany maybe 15 years earlier.
Wow.
Very weird. Very weird.
And they got your attention.
Yeah. And then, well, finally he emailed it to me. And within the shots that I've taken, there is one that is exactly like his. There is a treetops, to show whatever reference point. And then the star up there.
Wow.
Except mine is quite good in focus, but his is a little fuzzy. But nevertheless, you can make it out.
Wow. Well, thanks for that.
Yeah, it's a strange world.
It's a strange world. I agree. Okay.
Yeah.
Veronica, you got your hand up? Go ahead.
I think we need to go Dean first and then Veronica.
Okay, that's right.
And
Yeah,
I'm gonna jump in this question real quick and just ask Courtney if she's ever studied light language.
Okay, this is one of the best parts of all, and I'm so glad you brought it up because I had been trying to contact Grant for a year through Desta and, instant messaging things, no luck. And then Grant comes back with me a year later and says, "Hey, I need to talk with you about light language." And so, of course, I was like, "Oh, I got to jump on this call with Grant." And so that's what actually brought Grant and I together was light language discussions, and actually why I ended up in the Winnipeg group. And it was because I was looking at, these languages, the language of consciousness, dyslexia, these different areas of the brain. I had worked at Harborview Medical Center And I was surrounded by some really great medical doctors who were looking at the spiritual part of the brain. And I was able to learn from them and started looking into that in the, early 2000s. So I have been looking at light language, and I actually just had my first light language official reading where I paid money to talk with somebody, and she identified my light language people and where I'm from. And she said, I'm not from another planet. I'm from another dimension. And my people are like the dolphin beings. And so she gave me my name, and I've been working with that, doing the
Wow.
mantras,
I didn't even-
and I guess they're very playful. And so I've been testing out my name and my light language stuff recently.
I didn't even know you could do that. I need hooked up. So
I
I'll get
will. I'll hook you up. Yeah, it came through a friend of mine, because I was starting an anomalous experiencer group for individuals who had anomalous experiences and wanted to have support, social support, peer support. And so I connected with her because this other friend said, hey, you should do this reading with this individual. And I was like, okay, that'll be fun. But I was actually in her experiencer group to kind of see how it works and how I would facilitate one myself. So I did the light language thing. It's very interesting. And yes, it's a side study of mine. I continue to research it.
I have a woman I'm interviewing Friday. If you want to jump in and ask questions, she's a channeler, but then I moved off light language. She says, "Hang on," it goes into light language stuff. I actually went to the what's the guy? He does the brain studies of people having spiritual experiences and praying. Newberg. I went to him to do light language, put the people in the MRIs. And he wanted $50,000 plus expenses. So he said, "Oh, I'd love to do it, but for 10 people, $50,000 plus expenses." I said, "Well, that sort of solves that problem."
Wait, he needed 50,000 to run the whole study. Oh, wow.
5,000 a person.
Well, you saw my grant proposal for
you're
Bigelow,
a lot cheaper than he was.
I know, I'm a cheap date.
Wow. I just met a neuroradiologist. Maybe he could help us out with this side of MRIs and fMRIs. But yeah, I'll get with you about the light language too. Let's go to Dean. He's been very patient. Thanks, Dean.
Hi. A long time ago, someone mentioned something about Asperger's and what has happened or developed or redefined or something since then. What were they talking about? Interested in the subject.
There has been a movement away from the categorization of using Asperger's as one actual disorder in the DSM, and it's been folded into a spectrum of autism disorders. So they're called autism spectrum disorders rather than using the Asperger's diagnosis.
So this means that Asperger's really has no specific designation like it did before at all. Sounds like
it does have a designation, and there are certain types of categorizations for autism. So it is a specific disorder, yes, and there is a whole host of symptoms used to evaluate it. And they've even done more studies and have found that there are more individuals who have autism spectrum disorders than there were before previous, because the first studies that came out in the 90s had projected autism to be 1 in 70. And most recently in the last 5 years, it's now down to 1 in like 56. So they're continuing to work on it.
the numbers are diminishing and not expanding.
1 in 56 is more in the population than 1 in 70. And they're more likely thinking that it might even go down in the next round of studies, maybe to more like 1 in 35.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
If you have another question, feel free to ask it. I might know the answer.
Okay, yeah. You were talking about light languages. It just so happens that's one of the things I forgot to bring up. Ever since I was 7 years old, whenever I'd get startled or anything, I would yell in another language. And it's always the same words over and over again. And I also have a lot of symbols and everything that I write down that I communicate in. And I've known
Wow.
this since I was 7 also.
Wow, I'd like to see the
Yes, and I
symbols.
think, yeah, let's see the symbols. And I think that I want to share this with everybody just because I struggled with it. I think because my concrete mind and the way that my analytical mind works. When I was conceiving of light language, I was actually thinking that one of the things that would prove light language is real, right? For people who are skeptical and don't understand it and aren't in that world, when I went into the Winnipeg group for the very first time, one of the things that I walked away with as a potential study idea, because I got to hear people talk light language in that group, speak it, share it with one another. I mean, it was very beautiful. I felt like I didn't understand it, but I really feel like the validation for light language as a study for scientists, which I think would be amazing, is if we could find some people who speak that language and understand it. That would show some validation that there are individuals here that can understand each other, or even the symbols, if they could share them and they understand them.
If you want, I can show you some of the symbols. These are
Yes,
some of the symbols that I wrote.
Yeah, it looks familiar. Yeah.
It does.
Yep.
And then these are the white tattoos I have on my body. These are symbols on my body. And I don't know how many experiencers have the white tattoos on their bodies like I do. And it was
They gave them
Christina.
to you, you put them there.
No, I didn't put them there. They put them there.
Wow.
And then these are some more of the symbols here. Like that one stands for Archeron, and that other one that stands for multiverse and multi-universal councils. And this one stands for Yissaron. And these are on my body. See?
I think Courtney and I have to link up with you and get some of the,
let's follow up. Let's follow up after. Absolutely.
Because I've done a whole chapter in a new book on marks on people's bodies that they find. So yeah, let's follow up on that.
I'm good. I'm finally glad I can get a hold of you and work with somebody that knows these symbols. Maybe you know what their meanings are, because I can guess in by golly all day long and have no idea what they mean.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I would just, like Grant and I can get together with you, and there are so many people that Grant has already worked with. And so one of the things I would propose now is just that we kind of set up something like that, like a database that would have everything put into it, ordered, the different types of English language or other foreign languages that are associated with the symbols. And we could start from there. I know you already have a lot of work on that already, Grant.
Yeah. Beautiful. Let's
And
go to
your name's
Veronica, because she's been waiting a long time.
Marchesani. Okay,
Hi.
so can you give me your contact information, your email or something?
Yeah,
so I can
sure.
contact
Just
you?
just send me a direct message and I'll message you back.
You mean on the chat room here?
Yes, correct.
Okay, what about Grant Cameron? Can you give me
We're
his
in
email
contact.
address or something?
Yeah, I'm in contact with Courtney, so just give her and we'll be in contact with you.
Okay.
Beautiful. Veronica, go ahead. You've been waiting a long time here.
Yeah, I know. Thanks. I have kind of two questions. They're not too lengthy, but it's quicker for me to chat and to raise my hand because being visually impaired, I was writing manually and it took a while. My God. Anyway, so I was wondering, it's interesting when you mentioned Archives of the Impossible, the first thing, because I got the invitation for it last year and I never even knew about it. I never attended it before. And I didn't even know where Rice University was to that point, but which I thought was really quite something. I'm a heavy experiencer, but I don't share that much outside to too many people. But I was wondering first, my first question is it happening this year? Because it didn't seem like it's happening on Google or anywhere, virtually or otherwise. And kind of the second question is, what are your thoughts about the Arctic or Antarctic and any sort of secrecy or secrets down there? I know you do more psychic work, but I was just kind of wondering, there's some aspects that resonate, I know, with me more as far as beyond the polar regions and when we talk about dimensions and so on. And the theory, I'm not someone to be fully flat earth believer, but I think it is more of an egg shape. So anyhow, those are kind of my two questions.
I can respond to the first. No, it's not happening this year. Jeffrey's on sabbatical, so they're not having it this year, but they will next year. And the second on Antarctica, check out Linda Moulton Howe.
Oh yeah, the name rings a bell.
Yeah.
Can I ask
Earthfiles.com.
No, go ahead. Yeah. Can I ask Veronica a question? You said you're visually impaired and you've got sort of an experience here. Have you had any, I've done a lot of study with, as you may know, there's been studies done with people who are blind from birth or visually impaired who have the near-death experience and they're able to see. Have you ever had any things that would tie into your visual impairment in terms of paranormal phenomena that would indicate that it's more than just sight? And the other thing I have is I have the children from around the world. I've talked to all the trainers of these children, the blindfold reading, or the people that they train blind people to read and stuff like that. Is there any stories you can tell us about your impairment and paranormal phenomena?
Yeah, so yeah, so I'll start by saying that I tend to have a lot of dreams. I've always had that in my life, which people always ask, how do you dream? But I will tell you that to me, I had a visitation experience before I lost my sight. I actually was born fully sighted.
Okay.
I lost my sight at 4. I wasn't supposed to lose my sight, or as much as I did. I lost it to a brain tumor and a really big cyst. And my mom went to 3 doctors and they all said I looked normal. But finally, the 3rd doctor sent me to a CT scan and I had an emergency surgery within a week. But I remember seeing things before I lost my sight, a certain being kind of like in the distance. And I felt like they were always watching me. And they were always around. And I did get a telepathic message one time. My room was on the side where the street is, and I thought I thought a car pulled up once I was gonna go to sleep. And I thought a being came out and they were saying, like, wave to me telepathically. And I had a feeling, I was like, if I wave, something's gonna happen. But then they were so demanding and I did, and it was kind of like I'm the one. And then to me, this is more memory of a memory, but to me, I felt like a being actually came into my room and touched me on the back of the head when I moved on my side, and they had a very musky smell. To me, they had really big eyes, maybe, I don't know, more black, kind of dry wig-like hair and pants on that I recall, which I know sounds funny. Maybe more dry skin. And I got the sense, I was scared at the time. I was scared, but I know that when I was in the hospital and I was losing my sight, it's like kind of psychically, I felt as though they were still around and seeing what will happen, and always kind of watching like a what now look on their face. And I have a lot of experience and stuff that in my dreams, sometimes I swear I'm like, some things is it past life, some things is it now. I've had experiences in my awakened state where I've heard a voice change, somebody's voice completely changed, or I would hear people's voices in a dream and I didn't know them. And then about a week later, I hear them on a bus or somewhere. So I get things all the time, actually. I'm never abductee, but these are things that I don't lose time and I'm actually awake. So I very much believe in some hybridization program, maybe not to the extent, I don't think we know everything, even what we theorize, but there's definitely something out there because I've had it firsthand.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
So
Yeah.
Grant, I don't know if you remember this or not, but we had this pertains to what Veronica is saying, but we had a whole conversation about blindness, and we were having a discussion about about different types of interpretations of these experiences. Do you remember that? I sent you an email all about different types of injuries versus hallucinations. Do you remember that email? It was quite long, so
Yeah.
you might not have read through the whole thing.
Yeah.
But as a corollary to this, we were having a discussion around being able to see. And there have been different studies. One of the studies that I'm working on with a research partner of mine is in the Soviet Soviet Union. They did studies about individuals using blind sight. And I know that you've encountered some of that too, Grant, in your research, is using blind sight. And so it kind of relates to what you guys are talking about. And I would like to share eventually, once I get some of those research findings, with your community at some point. So maybe we can have a follow-up, but there were research studies in the Soviet Union that used blind sight which basically kicked off the SRI program, some of them. it was an inspiration, back then when they started the Stargate.
Yeah, I
So I
talked
just
to
want
the Russian trainers that are operating now, and some of that stuff just, I mean, that absolutely fascinates me. I mean, the Australian, if you saw the Australian, they got an Olympic team, and I challenged the Americans out of Utah. They've got a training thing there. It's a martial arts thing where they train the blindfold reading and stuff like that. That they should have an Olympics of these young kids. And it's the old idea that the left brain hasn't completely shut everything down yet, and these kids are really good, and they sort of lose the ability once they get to be about 13 years old. And that comes to this idea about everything being in your head, is the idea that if people have these reported out of body experiences where you float away from your body and you look back at your body and you say, is the consciousness in the brain? And you go, no, it's not, because the brain is over there and I'm up here and my consciousness is up here. And then you get this bizarre thing where the body is inside the consciousness. And if you float at an out of body experience to the window and look out, you see the entire universe is there and it's in your consciousness as well. And that's where, to me, I think it's significant, whether it's the people with autism spectrum, or whether it's blind people, that a lot of these people will teach you an awful lot of stuff that doesn't go according to ordinary psychology and physics.
And I wanted to bring that email up because I went through an analysis essentially of psychiatry and how they interpret certain types of things, like when people are blind and have hallucinations. And there is a specific disorder called Charles-Bonnet syndrome, and individuals who also are hearing impaired will have musical hallucinations. So it's very much in terms of, Oliver Sacks went all into that in some of his books and talked about this. So I'm just bringing it up as relevant because that is how that is seen through that field of medicine. And, that's what I did. And so that was my area of looking at these kind of things initially. But now looking at the anomalous, it's really opened my mind as a researcher. And I did get your email about the DNA study. And, I asked Nicole about that like a year ago. Has Grant, done the medium, DNA study?
We can't get the second person to take the test. That's the thing.
Okay.
But that's Nobel Prize. I mean, that DNA study, I mean, if Jay-Z Knight did that, that's Nobel Prize. If you get a second person and you can prove on paper that the DNA is changing when the person channels, it's game over. I mean, everything is flipped on its head. It's like,
yeah, it would be. It is a very unique, novel research area. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we were talking earlier about the spontaneous psi stuff, and you and I have both been kind of tracking Kit Green's initial conversation, with Kay Randall May and the recording and all that, and I know that that's in the works too. Now, I don't know if they've done it yet with Uri Geller and being at a distance and connecting them both, these functional MRIs to see if they can get the quantum communication telepathy going, but that's something I'm also tracking and hoping we'll get results for at some point.
Yeah. Nicole may be able to talk to Kit Green, so you may go through her. And we also may be having an interview with Uri Geller, who the claim is that Uri Geller was brought back into the remote viewing program after it was shut down. That's his claim. So we want to try to get that on record. But I think you and I are both on the same thing. We're on this sort of leading edge where nothing would surprise you at all. And as to the Oliver Sacks thing, I always say, who is a hallucination? It's sort of like in a lot of science, they use naming theory. This is a hallucination. This is just placebo. This is just evolution. This is just Mother Nature. And it's like, you're just naming stuff. You're not really explaining anything. It's like Moses opening the Red Sea. Did this, he did this, he did this. Okay, now explain the trick. It's one thing to put a name on it. It's another to explain it. And in science, as far as I'm concerned, science doesn't explain anything. They describe stuff. This happens, this happens. This is this part, this is the part. But in terms of explaining, they have no explanation for anything. Everything's just happening by accident. And
Uri, he claims, he's right out with it. Hopefully when you get him on your channel, will claim this again. But he basically said that the ETs gave him his abilities.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very bold about his statements. He also has said that another story that people might not know is that Andrei Puharich, had this pen, the famous pen story. And then there was supposedly these beings that landed and they brought the pen. The pen disappeared and they gave it to Uri. So I want to hear him go on the record about that, if that's true, that he got the pen back when they went and vectored in the UFOs and the pen was filled with ink. And so I really want to hear that. I want to hear if he goes on the record about that story again.
Yeah, I'll just tell a quick story because it applies. Like people always, when we're talking Uri Geller, people say, "Oh, he's a fraud. He's a fraud." Well, what happened with me and Uri Geller, he couldn't have made it up. And the story was that John Lennon, if you heard this story, John Lennon had this encounter with these beings, and they gave him this little egg, this little bronze egg, and he said, "I don't want it." He gave it to Uri Geller. He said, "This may be my ticket to another planet. I don't want it. You can have it." And Uri Geller has kept it on his person all his whole life. So Sid Goldberg is doing an interview with Uri Geller in Israel. And he said to me, he said, "I'm doing an interview with Uri. What do you want me to ask him?" I said, "Well, ask him about the egg. And I want a good photograph of the egg. I haven't got a good photograph of the egg." So Sid sends this photograph where he's got his hand out and the egg is on top of his hand. And I said to Sid, I said, "Oh, Sid, lucky boy, maybe your ticket to another planet." And as this is happening, he's sitting in a restaurant with Uri Geller, and he's saying, "Oh, there's this researcher in Canada, and he's the one that asked about the egg. Oh, here's an email from him right now." And as he's doing, his hair standing up on his arms, and he's pointing to the ceiling, and he says, "What do you mean?" And he's pointing to the ceiling, and Imagine by John Lennon is playing. And I said, "Well, Uri Geller may have hoaxed a lot of stuff. He didn't hoax that. There's no way he could control the music in there and the email coming in at that time." And that's the where I call it the Super Bowl. When you start looking at this stuff, it just gets so weird. Nothing would surprise me at all.
Yes, you've got the egg. I've got the pen. I'm waiting for the pen. You give me that pen, Grant.
Or you hear some of the stories that are told by Hal Puthoff and guys like that. The one with the ports where the Uri Geller has the thing in his mouth, and then the pin, back half of the pin falls in the lab behind them, and the Livermore Labs is doing experiments with Uri, and suddenly they got this arm floating around. These guys are haunted by this arm floating around, and they stop doing Uri Geller, and suddenly it goes away, and just the most bizarre stories. And this is like Hal Puthoff, like these high-level scientists telling these stories of this bizarre stuff that was happening in the labs. Just amazing.
So that's funny. I was just reading a research article about this thing that, once again, in psychiatry and psychology, they call the haunted person syndrome, which they basically is like the wastebasket for a lot of paranormal experiences. And they just say, we don't know what that is. They're a haunted person. And so the arm in Lawrence Livermore brings a whole new meaning to the haunted person syndrome. It's haunted person. It's a haunted person.
And then there's the story where they have that thing with the arm, and then I think it's Kit Green and Hal Puthoff in the hotel. Do you hear that story where they're in there, and suddenly somebody comes into the room and they grab this guy, and the guy's got one arm, and then the guy said, "Oh, I'm in the wrong room," and he leaves. And it's like these kind of stories. It's like, wow, it's just amazing. I want to ask you a question before we sort of shut down here. I know there's people still got their hands up again, but I want to ask you because you're doing are you doing the EEG or the MRI? Because one of the things that I've been following another scientist, and his name is escaping me right now, Tarrant, and he's doing the thing where he takes a look at mediums and he sees what's lighting up in the brain. Do you do this kind of stuff? Because he's talking about there's a pattern. So if you've got all the mediums will show the same pattern, that you get the back half of the brain lights up and this one diminishes. And his interpretation that the brain is not producing, it's actually a filter, that it's actually an inhibitor, and that consciousness is outside. And once you can send low frequency waves, it shuts down that part of the brain, which opens the brain up, which makes it responsive to some paranormal phenomena. Have you done that kind of work in terms of getting an actual pattern inside a brain of somebody who's, say, a medium?
Yeah, well, I'm where you are with the Newberg work, like looking at the areas, the parietal lobe, the different types of areas, and I'm looking at them kind of as cohesive and coherence, and finding coherence with the sensory awareness. But I'm wondering, with your guy, did he mention the default mode network?
Yep.
Did that sound familiar? Like, is that what he's
that's
studying?
Yeah, he mentioned that, and that's also in the psychedelics. That's basically the ego. That's the left brain shutting down, which is my interpretation, is that the brain is a filter, and that what you do with psychedelics or through meditation, you're quieting the left brain, but you're quieting the default mode network, the male brain that's creating the noise. And when you can get rid of the noise, you can pick up the signal. And so that's this idea. Yeah, he mentions, and that's the thing is, I think there's a lot of research going on now that indicates that you may say, well, the medium is making it up, but they're all producing the same pattern. That you can see these patterns inside the brain that shows they're doing something.
Yeah, I
What?
haven't.
Where is he? Where is this child? Where could he be?
Uh-oh. Christine, your mic is on.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. With the PhD work, I am really trying to work on using hypnosis as a way to break through some of these, I would say, stigmas around experiencers' memories. That's what I'm trying to do. So it's not so much about necessarily keying into the different types of networks per se. It's about looking at the current processing types, especially in near-death experiences, to see what was actually augmented and how to work with that sensory augmentation or that ability to perceive more and basically like recalling. I have found some research that shows that people who have had NDEs, some of them don't even need hypnosis to recall certain experiences. But for those who do need hypnosis, I'm trying to find a way to use certain types of hypnotic work to bring those images and that information back from their experience. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And it falls into a new line of research, which you probably saw in my Bix paper in the grant proposal, that deals with syncretic cognitions is what it's called. So it's new emerging research. So I'm going to try to keep staying on that as a line of inquiry. We'll see where it goes. I'll keep you updated.
Where would you say the brain, the memory is, if you're pulling it back? Do you have the interpretation it's like an Akashic field out there, or is it brain based?
Well, I don't necessarily believe that it's brain-based, but I have to believe and look at certain types of research in the brain where those functions are happening. But I'm also wondering, when the consciousness goes outside of the physical body and they get veridical information or true information about an environment, when they hover around their body in that location, one, why is that happening? And then two, when they go up through the membrane or through the light or the tunnel or whatever is created for them to safely travel to the next destination, I'm wondering when they come back, why certain sensory or certain senses are heightened when they come back, because there's always usually this difficult transition period when they come back in their body. And there's usually also a choice of why they come back. And sometimes they get veridical information like future events in their life that they need to be there for another family or whatever. So I'm just looking at hypnosis as a way to tap into those experiences to communicate at a deeper level, not only with their own soul, but also for integrating that experience so they have an easier time coming back to this reality. That's kind of what I'm working on.
You probably know it's what I think the figure is, what, 75 to 80% of near-death experiencers get divorced. And it's the same with the UFO. It's very hard. You become a different person, and you have this problem of integrating that you're sort of totally out there, and you do have that connection between the UFO and the near-death experience people. Is a lot of the near-death experience people will tell you they can't wear watches, they set lights off, they interrupt electrical equipment. That's the same as UFO people. They have the same complaint, especially when you're unable to wear a watch. And you say, well, maybe this is the same thing. Maybe it's just coming in a different costume.
Yeah, there's been some studies done on highly sensitive people, actually, who are sensitive to, certain types of electromagnetic stuff. They can't wear watches. It's a similar kind of research, but they're not always in those studies looking at things like the truly anomalous. They might look at energetic disruptions, but they're not necessarily looking at all the anomalous experiences in their life, like an NDE or, some other kind of UFO experience. I have done in some of my studies, the PhD work, I have done interviewers with experiencers who have had near deaths, but I've also had some kind of UFO overlay over that experience. And so they talk about, one of the things I've noticed is they talk about going to like a healing space, like a transitional healing space where there's some other beings there and they have some procedure done and then they go back into their body. And so I've heard of that, where people get these healings done by the beings before they, before they go through a near death, or there is a near death and there are beings there. So I think that's really interesting.
Or even the connection with the freeze survey, which you're probably familiar with,
Yes.
4,000 experiences, whatever. 37% of all near-death experiencers claim they had a near-death experience. And most of the ones I've talked to have had more than one near-death experience. And it's so,
Yes.
I want to ask you about the idea of trauma. I wrote it in one of my books, this idea that trauma sometimes opens up the filter, whether it's going through the front windshield of a car, or whether it's, having a brain injury or whatever it is, that this sort of opens up these people, and we see it as a negative, and yet you start wondering, well, was this planned in terms of your life purpose? Because what's the chances that you chose to have a random experience of being abducted, and you also chose a random experience of having a near-death experience? It seems
it's like a murder. It's like when you find two people murdered, like in the same location or the same group of friends. It's like the likelihood of that being a coincidence is very low. And so I think that it is an astronomical connection when you start to look at all the different various things that are all happening over someone's lifetime and they overlap. And I didn't realize that when I set out on this whole journey. I thought, okay, I'll just study this whole psychic thing. But then, it opens up into this wider field, and a lot of this research is connected. I think the problem is, especially like with truly anomalous stuff around UFOs, Jacques Vallée said this at the Soul Symposium, that reporting about the high strangeness goes down. As high strangeness goes up, reporting just drops because people don't want to be laughed at. And so I still think we have a lot of work to do on this area to make things reportable and accessible, and so people can really share what's going on.
That's why I think it's so important, if this does get announced that there's a psychic component to UFO and it gets admitted by the New York Times or by the government, then everything sort of shifts.
It will.
Then they realize, oh my God, this is the real deal here. And because a lot of times I'll get people, and I think I've run into the same thing as you. I went backwards. I went through the UFO thing, and people would say, I don't think I was abducted. I just have them in my dreams. I remember Bashar say, we come to you in your dreams because now you're in our world. And then I would say, you weren't abducted? No, I think it was just dreams. I have these weird dreams about beings. And I said, anything else weird happened in your life? And oh yeah, they start with 2 years old and this happened. And I had ghosts in my house. And they go through the whole litany, and you realize, like, all this stuff has got to be connected.
Yes. Yeah. I think that it's important to keep watching the research that hopefully Kit Green will come out on her. I heard there's a paper coming about intuition, and that it's not just the caudate putamen and it's not just experiencers. So I'm kind of waiting, anticipating this. They won't say anything more about it, but I think it's going to help us more with some of these connections or interconnectivity that experiencers might have with the craft.
Ross, you got a question you haven't asked?
Yes. Hello, Grant. Just a quick comment and one quick question. So I would like to acknowledge Mark Olson. Thank you very much, Mark, for having such a amazing interview with the guy from Veritas Radio. That was a true kick butt interview. I highly recommend everyone to re-listen to that interview. That was truly brilliant insight and information. So
give us 30 seconds. What was it about?
He was sharing a lot of his experiences and a lot of his insights. I mean, he's a researcher. I mean, very credible researcher with some unbelievable background and unbelievable history and his childhood. I mean, you cannot just make this stuff up. Sorry, So he is a very very credible person. So just so thank you, Mark. We would like to have him again if he can come. So That will be awesome. Just quick question. So the person who have an issue iPhone, it doesn't have a name. Do you have a website, or you have some kind of web page or something?
Are you talking about me? I'm
Yeah.
Susan Johnson. I'm the one that comes up as iPhone 3.
Yeah, it's you.
Yeah, no, I don't have a website per se, but I am starting to work on a book and all my experiences. And I think that the information I have in there, a lot of my experiences are in dream form. Like I go up when I'm asleep and I do a lot of work up there and stuff. And because my wiring is different in the brain because I have Asperger's syndrome, and I think that was by design, I'm able to remember a lot of things. I'm a conscious recaller. And I'm able to get a lot of detailed information, and they directed me or guided me. I had to study Sullivan waves and hypercoupling and everything when I was in high school and in college on my own. And I did take physics and everything. I was a nuclear contractor for a while. And the other thing, I get a lot of insight from them. Like she was talking about near-death experiences and what part in the brain does the brain comes from. You got, and this is what I learned from my experiences up there. You got the soul matrix and the biomatrix. And if the biomatrix deteriorates beyond the point of recognition, it's not compatible. It will not support the soul matrix.
Okay.
And that's where the coupling takes place.
Beautiful.
And then,
I think Ross wants your contact. He wants to contact.
Yeah, do you have do you have a contact information? Do you have so you don't have a website, right?
No, but we're going to get the contact information, Ross, and then I'll make contact. Ross runs one of the bigger groups in the United States, and he may want to discuss with you.
Yeah,
okay,
it's a fascinating.
Okay, so where's your name on the chat?
Well,
it's a you can chat me personally there. It's a T Ross Locklear.
Wait a minute.
T Ross Locklear.
Locklear. Right there.
Oh, okay, T Ross Locklear. Okay, and and you want me to give you my email or whatever?
Yeah, if you can give me your email address, would be good.
Yeah.
That's all.
And you said you run a big contactee group or something?
Yes, we have here in Colorado. I'm from Colorado, and we are in the Boulder area. So we have this group. It's called Boulder Exo. And so yes, it's a
lot of people would relate to you in that group.
Yeah, they would. It's really very we have a very interesting group. That's all I can say.
Okay. So we'll set that up. Put your contact in there. Otherwise, we'll provide you the information, Ross. I see we've got Amaris.
Thank you.
He's got a hand up here. Hasn't asked a question yet.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Grant. So this is
okay. I just texted.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So Courtney, you mentioned apports, Grant. I know you've written a book on them. Have you ever heard of them red marks, like small red marks appearing on people's bodies, on their floors, on their furniture, on their walls, books, letters, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's in my new book. I've got about 30 pages on this kind of stuff. Have you experienced this?
Yeah, all the time.
I'd like to talk to you. I've got it's a lot, and this is what I say, that this phenomena is a little bit more than what people think it is, because you do not come 1,000 light years to put a triangle on somebody's arm. Something else is going on here. They're doing this for a reason. They're trying to get people's attention, whatever it is, and it's very common. Or to put people's clothes. I mean, I got a friend here who's now since passed away, but he's the guy with the famous blue orb that got healed. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, Jim, do you ever put your clothes on inside out and backwards?" He said, "Yeah, twice." You want a picture of it? And he immediately sends me a photo of this. And you see this bizarre stuff. It's very fascinating. And when you see them, a bunch of them, one after another, you go like, this is really weird. Like, what is going on here?
Wow.
I have heard about the red apports. I did want to share with you, it kind of follows on to what Grant is talking about. I did meet Stanley Krippner in this really weird, wild way down in San Francisco. He had done a book about rolling thunder, and I got to drive him home that night and take him back to his place. And we were talking, and he suggested to me, he's like, Courtney, I really want you to read this book, A Psychiatrist in Paradise. So I did. And he said, I really want you to look at this one story about this healer. And so this one healer that he was suggesting he wanted me to read about, she had been given these rings. They were apports. They came through and they were given to her. And then she used the rings as a whole healing modality, where she would receive patients, they would come to her and she would place the rings on people's bodies and they would heal. And so it was really interesting because he was my access point into apports, and I learned a lot about them through Stanley Krippner. And then Grant ended up meeting Stanley and talking with him about all of his works on apports. So yes, they are fairly common, and sometimes they're signs of fortuitous things that are about to come. Sometimes they're a gift, like the healer, like the traditional healer, to use them. And so then they come with advice or instructions for how to incorporate them into your work. Or sometimes, they're like cones. They're like ancient cones, which help with knowledge or a path forward.
Wow, thank you both. That's fascinating. But yeah, Grant, we'd be happy to discuss that with you if you'd like off camera, but this is a daily thing.
Yeah, that's of interest. It's like synchronistic that I'm just, in fact, I got another one today. Someone has sent me one earlier today, which I'm
Wow.
going to include, but they come across, even if you get them, even Sasquatch, people up the triangles, and it's like, and you realize the Sasquatch thing is connected as well. So if you can, my email for anybody who wants to ask questions or might have something is whitehouseuFO@gmail.com.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm doing all these paranormal phenomena now. And I was going to call the book Crossovers, that indicate that you have these red marks appearing in all sorts of paranormal phenomena. You have orbs and all paranormal phenomena. You have the near-death experience connected with the death stuff, with the UFO stuff. But now I call it the Super Bowl, and I say it's all one bizarre thing that is just totally bizarre.
Right.
And that you and I get to play this, because you may think that you're sort of on the edge and your people won't talk to your friends and neighbors, whatever. But you got to realize, I mean, if you realize what's actually going on here, we are at the leading edge of the biggest story that has ever been told in this world. And you're like playing in the Super Bowl. You know the game is on. You're inside the stadium and you're actually on the field, and you don't know what your job is, but you got to play in the game. Most people, 99.9% of people, haven't got a clue what's going on. They live lives of quiet desperation, and then the doctor says to them, "You got 3 months to live," and suddenly they're scrambling around like, "What's going on? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What's going to happen?" And we get to live this every day. So, relish the fact that you got to play in this game and that you have something to contribute.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's fascinating. And is your book on apports out yet? I'd love to read that.
Yeah, it's out. The website is, if you go UF, it's all connected, which is one word, which is sort of the basic symbol of the whole thing. It's all connected. It's all one thing. It's all connected. And then books. It's all connected publishing. What I did was we tried to help people who had stories, like some of the stories tonight is, have you ever written this story down? And they say, no, I never wrote it down. I said, you need to write this story down, because now in today's publishing, you can publish one book. You can put it together. It doesn't have to be spelled right or grammar or anything like that. You can publish it for $5, spend $5 to get it shipped to you. You can put it on a counter, and you've got your story for your kids. Why would you not, if you've had these experiences, leave this story for your children? So what I did with It's All Connected Publishing is to go to people and say, I think you should, I'll help you try to publish this book. I'll show you how to do it. You can do it for yourself and get it recorded for future generations, because 500 years from now, everybody's going to think we lived at the time of Jesus. Like, those people are so lucky. They were actually there. They were part of this thing. And we don't realize the fact that this is, if you understand what's going on, especially this spiritual connection, that there's this psychic connection, that it sort of explains. Like, the way I look at it now is not UFOs or paranormal phenomena. I look at it the nature of reality. What this phenomena is doing is telling us, no, everything's not solid. No, the time and space is not what you think it is. No, the world is not flat. No, the sun does not go around there. And they're basically telling you, no, 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 no. And they're putting these weird things that are leading us to understand, how does reality actually work? Where are we coming from? Where are we going? Why did we come here? And are we doing what we're supposed to do? That's what this thing is all going to end up being. It's this bizarre signaling to us to get us to understand the world is not the way you think it is. If the world was the way people describe it, there would be no paranormal phenomena. There is paranormal phenomena. People aren't making this stuff up, and it's giving you the indication it is not the world you think it is. It's more complex, and they get you the awe, the curiosity. They get you with the miracle, and you start to chase it, and you can't get out of the rabbit hole, and everybody starts to put the thing together, and we start to explain what's actually going on. But they do it through curiosity. The way we do it is left brain. We come in and we say, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's. And then next thing you know, someone's pointing a gun and saying, get the hell out of here. What do you think you're doing? They're doing it right brain. They're doing the symbol. They're not giving you the answer. They're making you figure it out. They're getting you with this curiosity where you're totally stumped and you're trying to figure out, why is this happening? What's going on? And then you start to explore. That's what they want us to explore. They want us to try to figure it out rather than coming in and doing the homework. They're never going to land on the White House lawn. That's not how it works. They're not here they're not Santa Claus. They're doing something different. They're getting us to explain it, and they're doing it through these weird sort of stories that get people's attention and make them explore. And the more we explore, the closer we get to what is actual reality, which is 1,000 times more complex than what you think it is.
Wow. Well, thank you all very much. That's
Beautiful.
great.
So we're a little bit past time. Is there anything last thing you want to maybe give us your what you're looking for in case people have got stories they want to share with you, your contact information, and your books?
Anybody can contact me if they want to share at Inspired Potentials. That's my site. That's where my sensitive test is. You know, my book is also there if people are interested to know if they're sensitive. I get notes from people who are sensitive all the time, sharing their experiences, especially about synchronicities. That's always fun to share. So I'm online. Like Nicole said, I've been on Spaced Out Radio for the last probably 6 months doing the news. So you can find me there on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights, where I talk about the field of the phenomenon and what's going on, what's shaking loose. And the news segment, it's mostly about things that are breaking news. But you can also find out about any news about the whistleblower there and what he's sharing. I typically try to update everybody as much as I can, especially if there's anything new releasing.
Beautiful. And your book is?
Four Gifts of the Highly Sensitive is my book.
Beautiful. And that was done by which publisher? That was the
Hay House, Random House.
The big, they did all the big books. So you were the good publisher.
Yes, beautiful. And I'm hoping to write a new book, and they get first rights of refusal on my second book. So I'm writing it right now, and you and Nicole are both in it. I will give you that teaser. I'm going to be featuring Grant and Nicole in my next book. It's going to be a good one.
There you go. Well, we'll have you back on again and do an interview. It's been an honor to know you all these years. And I think a lot of people, because when you're going to be finished your PhD, I think a lot of people, this is what we're waiting for. You're waiting for the government to stand up and say there's a psychic connection. There's something out besides the physical that changed everything. But you bring credentials to the field, in that a lot of people are looking for a PhD, looking for somebody with a master's. It's like, this person's a smart person. They actually went to school. And so I think you bring a lot of stuff that the average person wouldn't bring, that you stood up against maybe losing your credentials as a, working in an academic setting. I was in an academic setting. I know what that's like. And
yeah.
Kudos to you.
And it's hard. There's not a lot of support for this type of work. And so I really have to do a lot of activism, especially with the hypnosis, because in my hypnosis class, there's 3 tiers, right, to use clinical hypnosis. And they hadn't heard about experiencers. They hadn't heard about anything. I mean, the one teacher was kind of complaining that one of his students wanted to do a hypnosis and remote viewing. And he's like, this has to be effective in a clinical setting. And so there's a lot of barriers and challenges to getting this work into academia, honestly.
When PhD, you've got an end date when you're going to be, we have to call you doctor?
Yeah, well, my mom had a stroke, so I'm just on hiatus right now, but I'm going to re-kick it off and get back into it. So hopefully in 2 years, I'll be done. Beautiful. Yeah.
It's, again, an honor to have been able to work with you, and thank you for showing up. And maybe one last question. Any hint as to something you may be dropping out? Spaced Out Radio, which is the big Canadian radio thing, runs every night of the week. Dave Scott runs it. And any hint as to what you may be dropping there next?
Well, I think that the whistleblower coming out is the big thing, and he might come on Spaced Out Radio. So that would
Wow, there you go.
I'm trying to get that to happen. So if it does happen, I will certainly reach out to the community and let everybody know. It's not yet, but maybe.
Beautiful. Any last words, Nicole? Or
I
she-
think she's tucking people into bed. So she sent me a note that she was gonna sign off. So I'll just say
Okay.
thank you for having me, Grant. It's been so nice to be here and back in the Winnipeg group.
And thank you to the other Nicole for helping out. And we'll have this up on the Winnipeg site, Winnipeg UFO site. And thank you to Mark for allowing me to host this, and the people that showed up here, taking your time. That's always valuable in today's, that you would take 2 hours of your time to come and listen to us. Hopefully you learned something.
Grant, I have one
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Can you tell me the name of your publishing company, and can you tell me your, like, an email where I can contact you or something?
The publishing company is It's All Connected Publishing. It's all one word. It's All Connected. And my email is whitehouseuFO@gmail.com.
White House UFO
At
at
gmail.com.
gmail. Yeah, I have a Gmail account too, because
There
it
you
seems
go.
like AOL censors a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I used to chase the president of the United States around, and then I suddenly realized that was a total waste of time. It was like, where we're going now, we're getting closer to the hey, there's Mark. Did you hear you got a congratulations on your interview with
Mel Fabregas.
Mel.
Oh,
Yeah.
not Fabregas.
Did you tell the
Hasselbeck.
story about golfing with Bubba Watson?
I didn't.
No, you
I
didn't.
No.
You
Well, I
need to
gotta
have him
tell ya,
back. Please have him back.
Yeah, Mel didn't need to have his arm twisted to get an interview. He never does interviews. And I
No,
just out of the
that's why.
blue,
That's why it's so awesome.
yeah, it was.
What's his
Mel
name?
came right
Mel-
out shooting with
Mel-
all guns.
What's the last name? Mel what?
Hasselbeck.
It's Veritas Radio or Veritas.
Yeah.
Yeah, Veritas Radio. Mel, Veritas Radio, you'll get him.
Hasselbeck is his name. He's changed his name.
Oh, okay. He's in Tucson, I think, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Mel was incredible. And I like interviewing you, Grant, and thank you for doing this tonight, by the way. I don't usually have to talk very much when we interview people like you or Mel, so it actually works out really good.
Well, thank you for showing up. Did you hear any of the interview?
Yeah, no, I did actually, last half. So it worked out beautifully. It's actually sort of fun to see how things work, and I'm in the chat. So I was just sort of seeing how, because I usually when you're interviewing, you don't have time to look at the chat and sort of you're trying to stay on topic. So whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's great. Hey, if anyone wants to talk after this, I'm not sure if you shut the recording off and then.
Yeah, we'll shut the recording off now, and then people want to talk. And just for people that know, we're doing it next month again, and I'm going to have on Preston Dennett. And Preston Dennett is going to talk about his 30 UFO books that he's written. And he's written books about UFOs over schools, onboard experiences. But I'm also going to spend a lot of time talking to him about his perfected out-of-body experience and where he goes and visiting dead people. Absolutely fascinating. I think he's doing his second book on out-of-body experience. He's an expert at this. So that's next month for the Winnipeg group. For people who want to jump in, he's a very, very interesting guy. I've interviewed him a number of times. So let me shut off the tape here, and then people who want to continue on.